You're listening to Shoe In, covering the ins and outs of all things footwear, from sneakers to heels, loafers to slippers, and every type of shoe in between. Brought to you by the FDRA, the Footwear Industries Association focused on retail, trade, politics, and fashion, helping create and enhance conversations on all things footwear. And now your footwear insiders, Matt Priest and Andy Holt.
Welcome back to the Shoe In Show, the Footwear Industries podcast. I am joined by Matt Priest and Jasmine Pendergrass from Team FDRA. Hey guys, how's it going?
Great.
Good, man. How are you?
Good. All practicing social distancing, all dialing into one studio location from different parts of Virginia. I guess we're all in Virginia now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Jasmine's safely back in the Commonwealth, which I'm happy about.
Yeah, it's getting a little scary out in New York. So.
Exactly. Well, as always, we're doing the podcast to help share best practices and give tips, innovation ideas, etc. And the guest we have on today is Stuart Jenkins, and he is no stranger to the Shoe In Show podcast. He did it with us out at the Material Show last year. And Stuart shot me an email not too long ago, and I love Stuart for just, always thinking outside the box. But the first line of the email was, "No better time to innovate than in the middle of a crisis." So Stuart, welcome back to the show.
Thanks. It's good to be here. I'm practicing social distancing, but for me, that's nothing new as an introvert. So,
Stuart is well known in the footwear industry as an innovation guru. He's worked at Decker's Brands. He's worked at Shoes for Crews. He has his own innovation consulting company, White Hat Innovations, I think it is. And he's also started his own company around sustainable materials with, I'm going to butcher it, but BLUMAKA.
BLUMAKA, that's right.
Boom, I got it.
You nailed it.
So Stuart, from all your experiences around building innovation culture, and I think that's how you talk about it, is not just thinking about we've got to be innovative, but actually how do you actually be innovative? How do you create a culture where you pull teams together and you're actually thinking outside the box as a unit instead of just thinking about product or material piecemeal? So in this current environment, how do you see innovation in this current crises? Because I think a lot of people are afraid, but there's also a lot of opportunity right now to change the way we do business, right?
Yeah, I think that's right, Andy. And you hate to talk about crises and because they sort of become self-fulfilling, but this is indeed a very challenging time, and it's going to get more challenging. And I think the tendency in challenging times is to retrench or to get conservative or cautious. It's right now we sort of feel like we're driving in the fog, and the reasonable and prudent driver in the fog would slow down and start crawling along. And yet I think as an innovator, and if you think of innovation as a driver of your business, in the middle of this fog, when it comes to innovation, you better put your foot right through the floor, because innovation will help take you to the sunshine on the other side of this morass or this fog. Yeah. So it's really counterintuitive.
Yeah.
What you have to do.
Yeah. One of the things you listed to me in the email that you sent me was, first of all, you're not in a meeting all day long. You're not doing those, daily grind. You're not at your desk. You're not pumping through things. People have a little bit of time to stop and to think. And you said, one thing that people should be doing is reviewing the top 10 best ideas that you have seen or you've thought about in the last year about innovation or innovative product or a different way of doing business. So actually taking a minute, taking a breath, and then really thinking things through differently the way we have been.
For sure, because one of the things that mitigates against innovation, people say this takes a long time, and it really doesn't. It really just means that you have to set aside a little bit of time, whether it's on your run or your bicycle ride or walking your dog, and say, okay, what are those 10 best ideas that I've had or have crossed my desk? But as a leader, if I were in an organization as a CEO today, I would send an email out to my top team members and say, would you reach down to all of your team members and have them send you their 10 best ideas? And so, if you're depending on the size of your company, if your top 10 lieutenants reach down to their 10 lieutenants, all of a sudden you're going to get, several hundred good ideas. And it doesn't take long to go through several hundred ideas and bring them up. The next thing I would do if I were a leader of an organization, I would task my leaders to call their top 5 vendors and say, what are the best ideas that you have seen or presented to us that we haven't accepted? Call your factory and say, what are the top 5 ideas that you have that could help us? Call your customers, your best 3 or 4 or 5 customers, and say, what would help you most right now? Because as a leader, you need to know where those ideas are. And trust me, if 200 or 300 ideas come into your office, then start charting them. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a great point, is that when people are thinking through this, they're thinking, oh, we've got to change everything. And sometimes things that you need to innovate or change are right in front of your face, or you didn't listen, or, like I had a conversation with a person in a brand the other day, and they had this great idea to solve a challenge, and they brought it up in a meeting and it just didn't happen. Then all of a sudden, with the spread of the virus everywhere, all of a sudden management wanted to start to do more digital stuff, and they started listening. So most of the stuff that you need to change or do, someone's thought of it. It's just that not everybody's been listening to it. Correct?
I think that that's a large part of it. I've also noticed that leaders are a little bit more willing to listen in a crisis than they are when everything's going good. When the wind's at your back, you actually think you're a really good sailor, but when it's coming straight at you, you find out who the good sailor is.
Yeah.
But I think then let's say you get 100 ideas and you go, well, that's overwhelming. Again, it's not. Look through a list of, if I know my business and I'm a leader and I'm a CEO, I could look through that list and say, okay, that's a top third idea, top 1/3 idea. The next, there's a middle third idea. I'm not quite sure, maybe. And then there's a bottom third. You go, I don't think those have a lot of merit. So don't try to sift 1 through 100 or 1 through 300. Sift top third, middle third, bottom third. And then think about, well, who could implement that, or what would that cost, or how long would that take? And then what revenue would that drive? And also think beyond, product innovation is not going to happen in the next 90 days or 120 days, especially in the footwear industry. But think about, well, what business model could I adjust? When we look at the last crisis, the financial crisis of 2008. Well, what really came out of that? Well, a lot of digital brands came out of that. And I think footwear brands right now should be asking themselves, do we want more digital brands to disrupt us, or how do we participate in this digital revolution without undermining our current business? I mean, somebody, for example, is going to come out with a subscription model. Normally in a economic downturn, people are looking for value or for lowering their costs, right? And how do you take advantage of that, not succumb to it? But I were in the soccer business right now, and all these soccer teams are on hold for little kids. I'd be thinking, okay, when this opens up again, how do I put together the soccer starter kit package for a very nice price, where I've got a soccer cleat, a recovery slide, and maybe a running shoe? Or, it's springtime and it's going to be sandal season or beach season. Well, I'm going to be sitting on a lot of sandals.
Yeah.
If I'm a retailer, so how do I package up those sandals, and instead of having 3 shipping costs, I ship 3 pair at one time and make that a good enough deal for the customer, but also maybe actually help my own operations and margins. So you've got to think beyond just what you're even comfortable doing, to find models that meet the customer where they are or the retailer where they are, and also benefit you as a brand.
Stuart, let me ask you this, because you talked about the importance of kind of continuing the innovation drive, and all the conversations we're having right now on March 23rd, 2020 is, how do I hold on to my cash? How do I stay solvent? How do I ensure I have liquidity? How do I pay my bills? Or what's my strategy? And so if you're the person in charge of innovation within a brand, and you're sitting in this environment, what's your recommendation for those professionals that are tasked with curating innovations and then driving those innovations to completion, or to at least to analyze them in an environment like this? Are you more aggressive? Are you raising your hand? Are you sitting on your hands and just kind of quietly curating what's out there? I mean, what advice do you have to the folks that have sat in your seat in these companies, and are trying to figure out, okay, my leadership is trying to figure out how to pay the bills. What's my role in this entire process?
Well, first of all, I don't believe you're going to be an innovator if you're ever sitting on your hands. So that takes that off the table. But I also have this fundamental belief that innovation can solve every problem that exists. I mean, that is the answer to every problem that exists. So what's the point? Well, if you have a rock in your shoe and you're walking across the street, you don't say, well, guys, let's form a committee on rocks and let's see what happens when that rock hurts. No, you stop and you take the rock out of your shoe. So the fundamental principle of innovation is find the pain. What is hurting me and what is hurting me the most? So at this time, if it's cash flow or holding on to your cash, you make a list of every one of those critical pain points, and you put them up there so that you can see them and so that your team can see them. And you say, okay, how do I solve that problem? What can we innovate around that problem? Because if you identify those pain points and you don't, I think Jim Collins calls it confronting the brutal facts. But if you put those out there and actually say, well, I need to look at this and start thinking about ways to solve it, ways that you've never considered before. That's where the innovation will happen. If you've got 10 major problems, will you solve all of them? No, but there will be several on that list that you can absolutely solve. Find the pain, focus on the pain, and fix the pain.
I think the pain right now is
align your executive team.
Yeah, I think the pain right now really is that inventory that's just sitting in the warehouses. So to Stuart's point about how retailers are going to have to package things together, because I can tell you most people are just going to think, well, I'm just going to have to discount down, but everybody's going to be discounting down, right? Doesn't mean it's going to move the dial. So to Stuart's point, it's interesting to group things together to give more value. It changes the value proposition.
If you're a multi-brand company, mix brands, something that I don't think I've ever seen anyone do. If you're a VF corporation, package, again, I don't know how their infrastructure works, but maybe they could find a way to do that. The other thing you'd say, well, what are my strengths? Well, if I'm a company that's shipping out of Kentucky and Kentucky isn't closed, well, what can I do to gain a competitive edge over people who are distributing out of Washington or California, whose warehouses are closed? Or, you have to look at what your strength is and what is going on in the environment and do things that you haven't done before, or at least think about doing it.
Yeah.
I mean, you can say what you want about shipping costs, but if you're shipping a pair of shoes 3 times and it costs you, let's say $20 or $23 to ship those 3 times. Well, what if you could ship 3 pair and it costs you $7? Well, there's 21 incremental dollars that could go into your account that you would be losing later. Or what if you put people on you've got these great customers and you say, look, we'll send you 3 pair of shoes right now and you pay us over time.
Mm-hmm.
3 payments.
Well, with that in mind, Stuart, what process innovations are we currently adopting right now for workflow and engagement and staying connected and social distancing that you think will outlive the crisis and drive for a more efficient and innovative industry?
Well, I don't think I have anything to add to that, Matt. I think that we are going to learn how to work efficiently remotely, or far more efficiently. I think that companies will be surprised at how productive people are at home. I talked to my son who works for a computer company in the Bay Area. I called him up in the middle of the day and said, "Hey, what are you doing, Dad?" I'm working. And I said, "Well, what's changed?" And he says, "Dad, nothing's changed. I got stuff to do. We'll talk to you tonight." And I think we're going to learn a lot about education. If you think about this more broadly than the shoe business, the United States of America is certainly conducting one of the largest experiments in online education, and probably the largest experiment in online education ever at our command. And hopefully we can learn from that and think what that could foretell about training, technical training or vocational training, but all training for our people. Think about what we're going to learn about training people about health habits and so forth for safety. I mean, there's this learning curve we're on right now. It's straight up and dark, but there will be a time when we say, okay, here's what we learned from that. And I hope that in an innovation department of a company that they're starting to chronicle, okay, the big issue, what's happened, what's happening in the world, what did we learn? And then, hopefully that the smart companies will really start harvesting these and making these part of their culture, 6, 8, 10 months down the way.
Andy, what I'm hearing from Stuart is that you and I can each purchase our own ranch somewhere in the hills of Virginia and just work from there continuously, because I know Stuart's a ranch guy, and that's what I'm hearing, permission to do that.
Well, that'll work well, Matt, because you know how you end up with a small fortune is start with a big one in ranching.
Oh my gosh, exactly. What I think is great though is you've got we're in this age where my sister's a teacher, and the tools have existed for them to teach remotely for a while. It doesn't, we don't exactly know how engagement works with a student at home unless their mom and dad are looking over their shoulder and making sure they're actually doing the work. But so that's the difference from a classroom. But the tools that she has at her disposal to put out worksheets and to do quizzes and to engage with students digitally is already there, and now they're taking advantage of it, and things will get built into that. So there'll be more video, there'll be more engagement. They'll figure out those little pain points as to how to make sure that the students paying attention and retaining the knowledge, et cetera. It could be more efficient that way, especially in some areas where students are, they have to travel an hour to get to school. So I think in that terms for our industry, what's really interesting is there exist platforms already that can digitize everything nearly. I mean, I still think people want to touch, feel, et cetera, and that's the right way to do it. But we have so many processes and steps that we have to go through just because they're there. Meaning somebody came up with a way to do this, 100 years ago, and for some reason it's just stayed with us, and we haven't killed off all these extra steps and processes that we could cut out. So I mean, luckily there's tools out there. I talked to Roman's CAD 3D CAD design the other day. We did a Kicks Over Coffee video about that. There's Modo. There's all these design tools. We built Material Exchange to allow designers to flip through a digital material swatch book from their home if they can't be in their material library at the office, and pick different materials. And all of a sudden your material team knows exactly what they're picking. You got the specs to see if they execute it accurately. It trims out so much inefficient time wasting using platforms like that. So the platforms exist for brands to get into the digital flow. It's just they just haven't had a reason to, and all of a sudden, unfortunately, now we all have a reason to, right?
Well, it's unfortunate in one way, but it is going to be fortunate in the sense that you talk about efficiency, and I'm telling you that I am more comfortable doing video sales calls or video conference calls with my customers today than I was 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
And, those executives of a certain age, my age, who never wanted to do a video conference call, now it's just in a few weeks, it's second nature. And I think that that's a good thing.
Yeah. Yeah, me too. I think people are socializing to it much more quickly because they have to. There's not really options like they were in the past. So,
and Matt, with your line of work with the government, my view is that there's no time to innovate government like today. And unfortunately, I don't think they're thinking that way. But these same principles would apply to all of our leaders.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Yeah, I don't think Congress is thinking that way, or the president. Definitely Treasury and the Fed. I just saw some news today about how they're changing the way they're going to lend to businesses. The Fed is opening up its pocketbook, and basically instead of lending to banks, they're going to lend to major corporations to ensure liquidity.
Right.
So they are innovating these processes, but the structures of the government, it's the same thing there that we see in footwear. These procedures were put in place 100 years ago, and they exist because no one changed it. No one just thought, and that, Matt and I were talking earlier about, the Senator Paul from Kentucky has the coronavirus, and what happens when our leaders all of a sudden all get sick, God forbid. But what if they all get sick? They can't go in there and vote because you have to vote physically in the Senate or in the House. There's no digital voting. You can't vote from your office. You have to be on the floor. All of a sudden, that rule that you can't vote digitally goes out the door because you can't even get a quorum to pass legislation to enact stimulus. Mm-hmm. So all of a sudden it starts to challenge these norms.
Of innovation to sort of go along with that is, what's the pain point? Okay, we can't gather. Or what's the bigger pain point? We've defined the greatest threat to the country as a military threat. So we have a tremendous military strength. But guess what? That military can't defend us against the greatest threat to the country right now because they aren't trained in that way. Mm-hmm. So we have to rethink, okay, we've got national defense, but we now have to think about how we define national defense in a more broad term, because think about what this portends for biological warfare. What do you think everybody just learned about how to bring the world economy to its knees?
Yep, sure.
not nuclear or something. So we have to rethink or innovate how we govern ourselves based on the pain points that we see, and we can't get locked in fighting World War II over and over again.
Yeah. Well, never has it been so patriotic to sit on your couch and watch Netflix. Never have I helped my community so much by not seeing them at all. Well, you must sacrifice. You must sit on your couch, watch the streaming Netflix. We will fight them on our couches. We will fight them in our kitchens. We will not go outside.
You know, at this point, I'm just glad this isn't a video conference.
Why is it? Are you like rolling your eyes at me?
Mm-hmm.
Well, Stuart, thank you so much as always for coming on the show and giving some great tips to leaders in our industry. And I think we let off, and I'll end it again. But no better time to innovate than the middle of a crisis. Mainly because you have to, but also because a crisis always, the rule of crises are you go into it and you come out of it. There's something on the end of this. It's like we will see the sunshine again. And if you want to see the sunshine at its most brightest, then you better be innovating right now today to prepare for that future.
Amen, brother.
As they say, when did Noah build the ark? He built the ark before the flood. So there we go. Stuart,
Boom.
yeah, there you go.
Theology on us.
Well, thank you. And of course, I wish all of you safety and health, and of course, the whole industry that. And it's going to be challenging. I think this is a time where everybody does have to hold hands metaphorically and pull together. And so, but in the meantime, I do think put your foot on the gas in innovation and go, because it's going to take you through it faster.
Yep.
Thanks a lot, guys.
And then I also want to let people know if you need help with your innovation strategy and culture and plans, then Stuart's your guy. You can, I bet the easiest way to connect with him is probably LinkedIn. You can drop him a message on LinkedIn. Stuart Jenkins. He's the owner of White Hat Innovations and BLUMAKA, and somebody that's been helping us think things through at FDRA about our industry and changes, and trying to help everybody get a little bit better. And Stuart, thanks as always. Appreciate you coming on the show and sharing your knowledge.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Stuart.
And folks, you can find us at shoeandshow.com. All 200 plus episodes are there. So if you're locked inside doing your part for humanity and social distancing, we hope you'll go in there and take some time to go back to some of the older episodes. Many of them are evergreen, so they're still relevant. Even in this day and age, and you can scale up really quickly with some tips and best practices from thought leaders, executives in our industry, and we hope that you will subscribe to our podcast if you're listening on iTunes, if you're listening to Spotify, anything and everything that's audio. We are on, but we thank you for listening. Stay safe out there, and until next time, Shoe In is out.
Shoe In has been brought to you by the FDRA, the Footwear Industries Association focused on retail, trade, politics, and fashion, helping create and enhance conversations on all things footwear. For information about FDRA, visit fdra.org.